And we're live.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. Hi, Abraham.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in with us today at another episode of the Medical Cannabis Community Insider, where we are bringing back Illinois State Representative Kathleen Willis, who represents the Addison District, to give us some more updates on what is happening in cannabis and social equity as it relates to Illinois and what the future of that might hold. Today, we're doing things a little bit different. We're actually taking our show on the road. I am traveling and on my way down to Florida, where I'm actually currently checking in. Literally across the street from me, there's an ad for a medical cannabis dispensary from Georgia. So it is a fun time to be living in this world. And with us taking our show on the road, we'll get right into it. So with that introduction, I'm going to pass it off to Mark, our host, to kick off this conversation.
Abraham, I don't want to do this to you, but I kind of do, because I think we have a personal relationship with the people that we talk to quite frequently. So why don't you, before we introduce Leader Willis, take this opportunity for you to tell us where you are and where you're going to be and why you're there. I think people care. You're on mute.
Sure. So this has been an interesting month for us, and we are on our way to Florida now for both a business trip as well as for some physical therapy and orthopedic appointments for our daughter, who's seeing a number of specialists who work with specific items that she is currently dealing with. And so we are out here today. We got the confirmation yesterday, and we started driving overnight. And so 2 minutes before we popped into the webinar event, I crossed the state line. We pulled into the rest stop and we jumped out to get the show started. So I appreciate you guys being flexible and attending the show with us.
Well, whatever else it is that we're talking about, I think Leader Willis said it earlier, family is the number one priority. And whatever else we're thinking about you, and we're sending you lots of love.
I appreciate it, and I love our community, our members, and our team for allowing me to make this trip possible. So with that said, let's get started.
Thank you very much. Leader Willis, thank you again for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure, Mark. Thanks.
So as I said, this is an opportunity to get to know you just more personally rather than as part of an event. And so you are a powerful person within the Illinois General Assembly. I think a lot of people have been grateful for your interest and leadership on the issue of cannabis and making things right. And a lot of people, in our community are wanting to get to know you better, wondering who you are, why you care about the issue. And so, and we certainly also want updates on what's going on, because that's critical. And people see you as one of our greatest champions on this issue. But before we even get there, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your district, about your work in the General Assembly, your family. Tell us about you.
Sure. So I'd be happy, who doesn't like talking about themselves, and especially a politician. But let me give you a little bit of background. I actually have a master's degree in library science. So I am a librarian. I worked at Elmhurst College for just under 20 years before I jumped into the General Assembly. I have a large family. I have 4 grown adult children now. My husband was a career firefighter. And before I ran for the General Assembly, I had worked on my local school board for 12 years. So that was my intro to politics. And prior to that, I was one of those super crazy ultimate involved moms with 4 children, and my youngest are a set of twins. So when they were born, I had 4 children, 5 and under. So a crazy household. And I think that actually helped prepare me for the General Assembly, because I learned how to multitask really well on that. And having a husband that was a career firefighter paramedic that was gone every 3rd day for 24 hours, I learned to do a lot of it by myself. He was wonderfully supportive when he was around, but due to his job, a lot of times he wasn't around. And so we did that for 27 years. And then he got injured on the job and ended up being a full-time at-home dad. And that's when I decided, for the sake of our marriage, let's have me go away for a couple of days a week. And so that worked really well. I switched and transitioned into running for state office. It was a good opportunity 8 years ago when I ran. It was right at the redistricting. We were looking for a woman to represent the area where I am. We were doing some watching of the Democrat-Republican battle, and it was time and ripe to get a Democrat into DuPage County. And my district is a combination of Cook and DuPage. So I represent O'Hare Airport and then the surrounding towns around there. So I have Addison, Wooddale, and Bensonville in DuPage County. And then I have in Cook, I have Northlake, Franklin Park, Melrose Park, Stone Park, a little bit of Bellwood, a little bit of Maywood. I also have just a smidget of Rosemont in there. I always tease people, it's the ungated part of Rosemont is my district. So that's a pretty diverse district. We have mega mansions in our district, and we have people that are barely able to make it go in our district. So we have that. It is currently about 52% Latinx, and so I do have a large Hispanic population, which puts me as a member of the Hispanic Caucus, which is probably part of the reason why I'm involved in this social equity issue regarding the cannabis licenses. I just recently was, if you want to call it a promotion, or tapped to go into leadership this last term. So I've been in leadership, it'll be 2 years in January. Before that, I just did a lot of grunt work, a lot of hard work. I have sat on the Human Services Committee all 8 years, working on making sure that we have health care and access to our communities, those that need it the most. I've also sat on education because that's important to me with my background. When I was at the college, not only was I a librarian, but I also taught courses there too. And so that was important to me also. And then for a number of years, because of my husband's background in the fire and EMS service, he was also one of the state union members, one of the state VPs for the AFFI. By osmosis, that's important to me, making sure that our first responders are taken care of in the fire service. And now that's recently expanded because my middle daughter is a police officer. So I look at them, not only the fire service, but also the law enforcement too. And so that's important to me too. My grown children, I have one that's a teacher and one that I told you that's in the fire service. I'm sorry, police service. That she'd hate me saying that. And then I have a son that works for a trucking logistics company. So transportation is important. And then I have a daughter that works for a senior living facility. And so sort of a mix of everything that comes into mom's job on a regular basis. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, thank you. That's actually really helpful, and I think it helps show people why you care about the things that you care about. Having spent many years working for the American Heart Association, I have developed sort of I want to be like them when I grow up attitude for firefighters in particular, for EMS people. They are doing remarkable things, just like law enforcement, and in some ways more than law enforcement.
Oh no, your mic cut off.
So just like law enforcement and maybe even more so than law enforcement, in a lot of ways are really on the front lines of keeping people safe, keeping people alive. I've worked a lot with getting them AEDs in their vehicles so they could use those heart shocker things. And I remember working with you on that years ago. And so in any case, it's sort of like our freedom in terms of the military, our safety in terms of law enforcement and EMS, those things are not free, to use an old cliche.
Mhm.
And, I don't want to make commentary on a societal level, but I probably will anyway. I wish they got paid as much as the rock stars.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. The teachers, like how much would education be better if teachers all could expect rock star salaries? Right?
Well, and I think with everybody homeschooling now with this e-learning, people have learned to appreciate teachers that much more so because they realize, hey, I'm not cut out for this. It takes a special breed to be able to be those teachers. So.
Yeah, even just with doing these, online things like this with you, I think we're all learning new skills and developing new appreciation for new things.
Mm-hmm.
So here's an interesting question. In terms of how COVID has impacted your world as a legislator, what are the kinds of things that so obviously you got your family and part of what I love is when I talk about your schedule, one of the things we need to be cognizant of is when grandma's got, grandkids there. And frankly, I think that's probably one of the most important parts of your job and your legacy as a parent, as a human being, is those grandkids. But again, I think our world has changed in profound ways, in part in terms of how you make laws, how you interact with your colleagues, and what that's going to look like for at least the foreseeable future, right? Hopefully it won't change permanently, because I hate to say it, I kind of miss Springfield.
Well, I think we all do. That's another family for us. You have your close friends and associates there. It's a different atmosphere, a different world in Springfield. And I think unless you're embedded in it, you don't really understand it. So it's really changed a lot. I mean, I do still have a few number of close colleagues that I talk to a couple times a week, but this morning was a perfect example. I'm a member of the Women's Caucus, the Democratic Women's Caucus, and we had a Zoom call early this morning, and it was great just to see everybody again. And we spent, 15, 20 minutes just yakking back and forth, not on any subject. So that's important. You need to keep that together on stuff. But, COVID certainly has affected us all. I am avoiding a lot of public contact because I am a babysitting grandma 2 days a week. So that's important. I need to make sure that I keep myself healthy to be able to do that for my son and my grandson. And then, also it's campaign season, and that's an interesting aspect too. How do you campaign in the world when people don't want you knocking on their doors or coming to their doorstep or taking paper from you? So that's a whole nother world. And then we've had, back in May, we had no choice. We had to get together to do the budget. And how do we do that in a safe way? Putting it at a minimum 120 people in a room, not to mention we have the need for aides and people that help the logistics and stuff. So we probably had about 150 people in one room. And how do you do that safely? Well, we went and rented out the house rented out the convention center, but that also was very costly and difficult. And how do you feed all these people too, when there's not a lot of restaurants that were open to be able to do that? So we catered food in, and they were all in individual boxes. And then how do you have your typical committee meetings where you're, a lot of the work, people that aren't in Springfield think we do everything on the House floor. No, all the work's done in small groups in those committee rooms where we're working back and forth to make sure we put the best bill forward to actually have everybody vote on. And that's very difficult to do when you can't be within 6 feet of each other. And having those sidebars is hard to do with a mask on. But we managed. We got through a budget. We managed to get that done. We managed to get some critical bills put through, but the rest of the stuff got put on hold. And we're now at the point where that stuff that's on hold, that's just as important, and things that we need to now go forward in. We do have a veto session set up in November. We'll see what happens then. And then, obviously come January when we start our spring session, we've got to go back to life as usual as best as we can.
Well, thank you for giving it the old college try. It's not easy, that's for sure, and it's not easy for anyone. And it's definitely changed the game for all of us: legislators, lobbyists, hangers-on, food service people. I mean, I can only imagine. It's like the people that I used to see every night for dinner in one of 4 restaurants. It's like I almost feel like I should be sending them a check just to support them while they're not working.
Right.
Same for you. So in terms of cannabis, obviously COVID caused a delay and then further delays with what's going on now. To the best of your understanding, where are we on cannabis? Sort of, what have you been hearing? What's your caucus saying? What's the administration saying? Are you guys serious that stuff's going to have to get done, in veto session related to this? It can't wait until next year. Sort of what's the zeitgeist among the, in your environment right now?
So I think everybody, whether they supported the expansion to recreational cannabis or not, realizes that it's here, it's going to stay. And with that in mind, let's make it work the way it's supposed to work. And so I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing that there are flaws that we passed back in the spring that had unintended consequences or didn't go the way we were supposed to, which oftentimes happens when you have a big piece of legislation. You have to come back and tweak it and fix that stuff. So I think that's exactly where we're at right now, that we have seen, okay, we were putting in recreational cannabis in Illinois. We had pledged that we were going to put in a lot of social equity issues, things we were going to address that, making sure that it wasn't just the big corporations that were coming in and setting up shop, that we could have some smaller shops, certainly put in some financial assistance for communities that were hit the hardest on the war on drugs or hit the hardest on a number of economic issues that were affecting them. And so this was going to be the saving grace. This was going to save the state of Illinois by putting in this and having it go the right way. It did in some ways. I mean, let's face it, with everything else shutting down, the only place that there's money coming into the state is in the cannabis industry. Those taxes are still coming into the state. And if we didn't have that money coming in, we'd be in so much worse shape than we are now. So I think we need to recognize that and realize that. But on the same token, when we had the new licenses delayed coming out, that was devastating, because the longer it took for them to come out, it'd be the longer for that people to get those licenses and to set up shop and start. We also saw that things weren't the way they were supposed to be. And that's what we have to look at. How can we fix that? And so that's where we're at right now. We saw the flaws in the system. We saw that while we had an intent to have a true social equity licenses go out there and making sure that we were putting in smaller shops for minorities and individuals that needed to keep those in their communities, we weren't getting that. And so that's where we're at right now. We're at the point where we need to fix it. Some of those things also we saw with when they hired the firm to do the licensing review. That wasn't necessarily guided the way we wanted it to be. And so we're going to have to work on that. I think the governor has realized finally, through your help and the community help on this.
Through your help. through your leadership, through your, you know what, it's rare that the title actually fits, but leader is actually quite apt right now. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. Well, thank you. I am just moving the way the community has asked me to move, and that's where it comes through on that. People have reached out and said we need a voice, and I'm happy to take my leadership title and put it to good use. And so that's what's happened. We have seen the governor had enough people. People in leadership, people in various communities, a lot of groups came together as coalitions and said, hey, this isn't right. We need to fix it. So it stopped him from going forward right away, realizing that in order for him to have some credibility, he has to listen to us and do it the right way. And I think he's taking a step back, reviewing those applicants, and hopefully we'll get at least some of it the right way. Also, it prevents him from having to be in the court defending what he did too. I think lawsuits certainly didn't hurt to open up his eyes. And so that's where we're at now. We're looking at those things to get cleaned up here. And we're certainly looking at how to make sure that this isn't just a Band-Aid, but a way forward on the path of true social equity when we look at licenses for recreational cannabis.
What's the path from here? I think a lot of people are curious about, sort of what you guys are doing publicly, what you guys are doing privately. Based on previous conversations with you, I think part of what you want to do is maybe do a couple more events where people get to speak out. Because I think part of it is there's still a lot of pent up pressure. Sort of, we need to let out the steam, and people want to talk about their particular issues. So one of the things you thought about is maybe a couple more town halls. Where's that? And also, you had one meeting with sort of a group of policy people, right? Policy stakeholders. There were groups representing social equity. There were groups representing industry. So on both those tracks, in terms of having people the ability to still have their say, you speak to power, tell their experience, and also the process of making sure that people who have not had a seat at the table previously now have a seat at the table. What are your thoughts and plans on that? And I understand it's sort of, part of it is we're building the airplane as we're flying. We have no choice, right? Otherwise, lots of things stop, including people's access to cannabis and the state's access to revenue. And so we have no choice but to do this as we're sort of fix it as we're flying it, build it as we're flying it. So given all that, where are you on, giving more people voices, getting more people access to the sort of being at the table as the changes are made? What's going to go on with that?
So it's a multi-front type of approach, like you said. So we certainly need to look at those that have already put in licenses and didn't come up to the top review, what we can do to make sure that they have a chance to fix their discrepancies, their disparities, I guess is what they call. So we can fix that if it's possible. Not changing their application, but making sure that their application was truly reviewed appropriately. So we have that whole aspect that's still going on. And I think the governor's office has taken the proper steps to do that. I'm hearing good things on that, but I haven't gotten final confirmation. So that's one thing that we're working and dealing with. And then the second part is, okay, how do we make sure that we don't have to go through this every time a new license gets issued? And so what can we do on that? And that's where the policy part comes in. And so we certainly want to hear from people. And I do anticipate us doing at least one more town hall round where we actually hear from people that feel that their voice wasn't heard or that there was something that wasn't appropriately looked at in their license application. And then we need to take the next step as to having some policy and really putting together what do we need to fix, what do we have in statute now that isn't quite the way it needs to be. So what do we need to fix in legislative statute? Or is there things that we just need to go back to rules and tweak there? And so that's some of it. So a lot of the stuff was done in rules that it didn't come out the way legislative intent was. And if that's the case, sometimes it means let's make that legislative intent crystal clear by putting in new legislation. And so I think that's where Representative Ford and I are looking at trying to have all of the people come together that have seen these flaws, would like to see things tweaked a little better and put in more specifics into the legislation. And so we're asking people to submit ideas and policy in writing to us. We're listening to them also, but also in writing always helps. We're going to put all of these together, see which ones work, which ones don't work. I have some really great lawyers that work in the Democratic House caucus, and they're going to try to put it all together for us. And then before we actually even file the bill, we're going to ask people for their input. I think that's really important to have everybody have input on it. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to change it all the way, and we can't always promise everybody's going to get everything. One of the things I've learned is the best bills are usually the ones where everybody doesn't like something in it, because that means we all compromised, and that's always good to compromise and work together. So that's where we're at right now, looking at that kind of stuff. It's going to have to happen relatively fast, because we're hoping to be able to put it together and actually have a piece of legislation filed in time for veto session. If we have veto session November 17th, and if that's the case, it's going to have to go through the House chambers first and the first week, and then our second week of veto go through the Senate chambers so that we can have a chance of it being law. If it doesn't happen, that means we're on hold until January. So we would like to be ready to do it now, because we know the next round of licenses are liable to be in January. At least that's what we're hoping, and we're promoting to the governor to do the next round in January so that we can have some of these people that didn't make this round not have to wait a full year.
So one of the news items then here is that you are, so right now by law, the next wave of licenses is due to be handed out at the end of 2021. Your sense is you're going to, in the next iteration of what you pass, in part use that legislation to perhaps move up future rounds of licenses earlier in the year.
Yeah, I think we would like to see that happen, just because we feel that there are a number of very good applicants in a lot of good areas that are going to end up being left behind in this round of licenses, because we're not really sure until the governor's office is done, what they did with only having the 21 licenses was legal. But we would love to see those 21 licensees be more groups get into there. And we're not 100% sure yet if that's going to happen. If that doesn't happen, then we're going to really push to have let's say a 2.5 lottery come in January, that we can get it done. Then at least part of those in January, of those that applied this round that didn't make it, but were, within a couple of points of it. And then we'll go again to another round in the spring, like we had hoped originally planned.
Well, I think that's good news for a lot of people who are going to learn some things from this round and take it into the future. In terms of those people who were disappointed in the first round, are you contemplating doing anything to sort of encourage them to play again? That is there maybe thinking that this time around they might not have to pay an application fee, or what can we do for them?
Yeah, that's actually been something that's come up for discussion to maybe, if you are not changing your application at all, if you're not changing your ownership or anything like that, and you're just reapplying, is there a need to put in a whole new full application fee or something like that? And I think that is something that I'm open for discussion on. I would like to see that, especially as I've talked to a number of people that have done these applications and they've taken their life savings and or taken out a small loan to be able to do this. How do you tell them, well, now you got to take out another one with no guarantee that you're going to get it? And so I would be open to seeing that, that application fee be able to carry over at least for, maybe an 18-month period for everybody, that they wouldn't have to reapply, unless they're adding something into there or something along those lines, because I think that's the fair thing to do. I'm all about fairness.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting is, you sort of have a group of people who are, on the one hand, want due process and a careful review of their applications. On the other hand, they're still out here sort of bleeding cash, right? And I can continue that analogy forever. So you've got, craft grow applicants who are still waiting for word on their licenses.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happening there is that, as you know, they essentially have to have, in run up to hearing whether even they get a license, they have to have essentially full control of an industrial facility. Essentially a mid-sized, manufacturing facility where you can do inspection, where you can grow, where you can have a kitchen to infuse and all those kinds of things. So that property has to be locked down, and it's locked down not just with the guy who quote unquote owns it, but with the ultimate authority. So if you're talking to the owner, but they have a mortgage, it's actually the holder of the mortgage that has to sign off on the use of the property for cannabis purposes, not only the owner who pays the mortgage. So we got people who are, sort of now shelling out 10 grand a month just as a placeholder for the property. And of course, this in and of itself advantages those who have rather than those who have not. And I keep saying, people are treading water, they're bleeding cash. And if you want to continue the analogy further as to how sort of counter this is to the intent of what we want, the more cash they're bleeding, the more the sharks are circling in the water. The people with cash, who are not necessarily social equity applicants, are sitting there waiting for these people to blow through everything, come close to bankruptcy. Well, and either they go bankrupt and no amount of social equity is going to help them get a license, or they're going to really have to water down what they got almost immediately in terms of equity. So this is a horrible issue, and we want the state to do a good job. At the same time, we want the state to hurry the heck up. And of course, there's the rub. This is not unusual to you because you're often in a situation where 6 different sides of an issue want 6 different things, 6 different bills, and 6 different kinds of timing. And, and it's not, some people think it's just like our opinion and their opinion, like there's 2 sides to every issue. Usually in the General Assembly, there's 5, 6, 7, 8 sides. And that's even just the people who come out and articulate their, agenda clearly. Then there are others that might be playing games. So how do you at the same time make sure that people get the sort of the quality and respect and attention that their application warrants, but don't do it in a way that's going to bankrupt some of the people we want to help?
Well, and I think that's what we've seen really play out here, where there was the delay in awarding the licenses or even accepting applications by, 4 or 5 months right there because of the pandemic. And then we had it put out and it was like, this didn't work. I mean, the world of Springfield is a lot of hurry up and waits. And so you have a lot of that hurry up, and then wait. And then we also have, if anyone's ever been down there in the month of May when we're doing our budget and everything is going through crazy, you got bills that come through that you might get it on your desk at 2:00 in the afternoon and you're voting on it at 4. And it's impossible to vet everything that's in there. And you're just taking the faith of the person that wrote it And then what happens is what we're dealing with right now. You got to come back next session and clean up the mistakes that were in there. And that's what happens on it. So it's really hard to get that balance. That's what we're trying to work towards, getting that balance so that we don't have people bleeding cash out in the holding pattern, making sure they know, because the worst thing we can see is we don't want people that qualify, that have put everything in place, not get what they need, and then possibly have them get bought out by these big corporations that aren't even based in Illinois. And that's certainly not our legislative intent with doing this. So we have to make sure that we get everything sorted out as quickly as possible, but get it done the right way. Not take shortcuts where we have to then come back and clean up. So that's what we're trying to work on. That's why we're doing these listening tours. That's why we're talking to people. We're asking for their input every step along the way.
Thank you. And as always, you've heard me say this to you before, but better you than me. Wow. You got, King Solomon type work ahead of you. But again, that's probably not even daunting because that's nothing unusual for you, right? You're always.
It's all in the day of work.
Right. Right. And so, like, to me, it's important that people understand. On the other way, this is sort of the house is on fire kind of a crisis. On the other hand, it also has to be taken within the context of, sort of legislative sausage making. And every crisis, for a wife of a firefighter, this is an apt analogy. There are probably a lot of houses on fire at the same time, especially given everything that we've been through. So it's like, which ones gets the 911 treatment first, right?
Well, and I think we saw that a lot when we put so much on hold in May, because to everybody, their bill is the most important one. That's what they have to look at. That is the most vital to them. And I have people lined up outside my office talking to me as a lobbyist when I'm in Springfield on how important their bill is, more so than everybody else's. And that's hard to pick and choose which one, because you're passionate about many, many things. As I'm very diverse in what I work on. So we'll get there eventually. Hopefully we'll have a full session to get everything sorted out.
Well, fingers crossed. I'm thinking we have a lot of stuff in Q&A and chat. If you don't mind, Leader Willis, we'll maybe start working with Abraham and Andrew to get some of those questions up so that you can take a few of them on. Is that okay?
No problem. Let's go.
Sounds good. Andrew or Abraham, whoever's doing
I'll throw the first question, and I'll let Andrew fill the rest. Did you mention that the first round social equity applicants would be able to qualify for additional license picks in January or in the spring session? Or if not, is that something that is possible, so that those first round applicants don't have their entire opportunity gone to waste? Because I think the cognizant understanding is that everybody right now who's not going to win pretty much wasted a lot of the time and efforts. And we mentioned allowing them to reapply for the second round within the context that that would allow them to get a higher score. But if they had a tiered score that was past the cutoff, would they be able to qualify for to be picked in addition to rounds?
Yeah, that is, it's not guaranteed. It's an idea that has come through. I think Representative Ford and a number of other of my colleagues like that idea to try to do it. We would have to codify the idea into legislation to make it happen. But I think that is something that we are certainly open to doing, and hoping that the governor's office thinks it's a good idea too. So there's no guarantee, but it's an idea that I think has some legs to be moving forward on. And I would certainly like to see that happen, especially as I've talked to many of the applicants that, not those that put in 10 applications, but the ones that put in one. And that, I talked to one that had the grandmother put in her savings on it. Those are the kind of applicants that I would say, and they only missed a perfect score by 2 or 3 points. Those are the people we want to try to help, that not make them start all over.
So the bottom line is that there is a desire, at least among some of our champions, to move up the future round of applications, separate from whatever happens with the existing 75, to also say, let's give people a quicker shot at the ring, especially those that came close this time around. So we're not necessarily talking about the 75 now, what the 21 will get. When you talk about moving up future rounds, you're talking about opening up future rounds for new applications, completely separate, but rounds where former applicants will be encouraged to apply again, perhaps with a discounted application fee or something.
Yes. Short answer, yes.
Okay, I just, because I think it's confusing in terms of what are we going to do now for the people who are, mad now,
Mhm.
and then what are we going to do for them and everyone else in future rounds and when those rounds. So, like as somebody who works on applications with clients, one of the things I hear is, well, we better start getting clients ready if they want to apply again, perhaps before the end of next year. So just to clarify, Abraham, that's sort of what I wanted to add to that question or answer. Does that make it clearer, you think, for folks?
I think it's a lot more clear than it was before, so I appreciate the clarification.
Okay.
Andrew, do we have anything else in the Q&A?
The next question would be, bouncing off that topic, would this have the possibility to increase the number of overall licenses?
So the number of overall licenses are still set in statute. Now, that does not mean that we can't change that. We can always change that. And that's the joys or the heartaches of the legislature. It would not be able to be changed without legislation, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. We have a lot more power than some people realize. So sometimes we can do it, and it could happen very easily. It could be increased, or it could be that we hit a brick wall. We'll see. I know there are some states that don't have in legislation a limit on how many licenses can go out, and that might be something we even explore ourselves.
And that's
Oklahoma's one of those states, right?
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes, Oklahoma is one of those states. But and this is a sort of an issue that Abraham and I have talked about, going back and forth. And I've actually appreciated him educating me on it, because to me, one of the issues is the more licenses we print, the less each one is worth. Right? So if we create wealth for people by giving them licenses, as we have more and more licenses, each one is worth less and less. We're watering down some of that social equity wealth that we've created. And that's been an issue to me. Whereas Abraham has been like, see, you're thinking about it as a white guy. But, people aren't worried about whether they have $10 million right now or $5 million. They just want $1 million in a license. And that's what's going to encourage them, and that's what's going to change their life, rather than worrying about the 10 million. Am I right, Abraham? Am I getting your how you've educated me correctly?
Yeah, I think you're nailing it on the head on behalf of social equity applicants around the state, and honestly, probably around the nation.
Well, and that's been really interesting to me, because, I think people, to me, it rings true in a sense, because I always tell people, I'm happy to subcontract as a lobbyist. I don't need to be the lead guy. I always tell LaShawn Ford, actually, I don't know if you've heard me, and this is, of course, very funny to me, but I don't want to be the highest paid guy around him. I just want to be the highest paid white guy around him. But in any case, the reality is that as sensitive as I think I am, and I don't speak to sort of fellow Caucasians, but as sensitive as I am, it's really incredibly valuable to me to have partners who are more sensitive or see things differently. This is why this collaboration between the leadership and the various caucuses, the Latino caucus, the Black caucus, is a critical thing, because we sort of don't know what we don't know. right?
Mhm.
So, Andrew, is there another question? Because I wanted to ask. All right. Well, let's go.
One, I think we got a good one.
Okay.
What can we do, people of Illinois, constituents, to help this whole process happen in this session, hopefully?
So I think there's a couple of things that can do. Continue to work with the coalitions that are voicing their concerns, but also please make sure that you reach out to Representative Ford or myself if you have policy ideas. I think that's as we are going forward, putting that policy into legislation, it's important that we hear from as many people as possible. And so I'm going to encourage, and my email address is rep, Willis, WILLIS 77 @gmail.com. Send me your ideas. Send me your information that you think is lacking. And we will look at it and try to incorporate as many ideas that work into what we're putting together. I think it's also important that you reach out to Mark and to Abraham and to other people that are working in together as coalitions to make sure that you let them know what has worked, what hasn't worked. If you have a major complaint, or if you feel that you were wronged somehow in the licensing process, don't sit back quietly. Let people know about it. Let's hear about it. Let's see if we can find and fix those wrongs. That's our goal, to make sure that we do that as we go forward.
Assuming that we are going to have a sort of a reprise, a repeat of the very limited spring session where people like me are not necessarily welcome in Springfield and don't need to start renting hotel rooms November 17th, assuming that, and I think it's likelier than not that the session will look similar to the spring COVID session this time around. What can people do? I mean, how does sort of virtual engagement change? It's interesting to me in some ways that it weakens the role of the lobbyist, right? We're not as much of a filter between you and the people who are trying to communicate with you, especially when you get out there and give everybody your email address. So, by the way, next time check with me, might be weakening my earnings. I'm just kidding.
Well,
I'm just absolutely kidding. But the reality is how do people do things differently given this new world in terms of citizen lobbying?
Right. Well, and that's true. I mean, that is the one thing I think COVID has certainly hurt the lobbyists the most. Because it's that 5-minute talk from one building to the other that you get all of your work done. You trap us in an elevator, so we have no choice but to listen. And those are the kind of things that, or send a note into us and say, come meet me out at the rail. That's so much of the work. There are over 6,000 bills that come through in a year in the House. It's impossible for us to know what every one of those bills are. We depend upon lobbyists to bring things and put them on our radar. So how do we work it when we don't have the lobbyists following us around? That's when the average constituent needs to call or email their rep or their senator's offices. Keep those lines of communication going. People that are in communities that or want to move into those communities and set up shop, they need to find out who is your local rep, who is your local senator, and talk to them. Make a phone call, ask for them to call you back, send an email, send a written old snail mail letter. I mean, those are the kind of things that we see, and it brings it to our attention that says, hey, this is something I need to look at. I have a lot of reps that aren't even involved in this at all right now, but I'm going to need their votes. And so we need to get them involved and have it be put on their radar. So that's what you have to do.
Yeah, and we're sort of trying to, on our end, expand the universe of the kinds of folks that we're talking to. So we'll be talking to, by way of promo, we'll be talking at 12:30 on Friday to State Senator Christine Castro to get sort of additional Latino caucus perspective and just overall perspective from the D side of the Senate. And we're actually going to talk to one of your counterparts, Representative David Welter, next week, probably next Friday at noon. I just talked to him earlier today, and he was very engaged on the Republican side on this issue, and really, I think has kept an open mind and also has been very effective at make sure that he remains credible and influential, even though he's not in the majority. And I think that's critical because all of you need partners to work with on all sides of an issue. Because especially on cannabis, it's nice when it's bipartisan, whatever gets done. Especially on the tougher issues for you guys, it's nicer when there is a bipartisan will to do something. So we're going to be talking to them. We encourage everybody else to be talking to them. Did you want to jump in, Representative Willis, or should we take some more questions?
Well, I'll just do a 30-second because it looks like we're getting close to wrapping up on things. But it is true. Majority of the bills do pass bipartisanly. We do try to work together, and that's the most important thing. And David Welter is one of the best to be working bipartisanly across the aisle with. So, all right, we'll go. Andy, is there another question that we need to do?
I was just saying we had time for one more question if Mark wanted to ask one more intriguing question to let everybody hold over until our next event.
Just one more intriguing question. Let's see. No, I actually don't have any more intriguing questions. And the fact is that what's great about this format is that we don't have to squeeze out, we don't have to cut it short, or we don't have to make it long and make up questions. I think we actually have had a great conversation. So Abraham, anything else on your end that you want to jump in with, or anything, Andrew, that you wanted to sort of announce that's been, as we've been following the chat and the questions, is there anything else? So there's one question from Jeff that says, any chance we can get answers to some of the tougher questions? I thought that that's what we were doing. So, in a lot of ways, Representative, this is my constituency, right? So I have to try to satisfy them. What's a really tough question, Abraham, Andrew?
Let's see.
I have one that I want to address, as I always do. You're still going to have to deal with the veterans issue. It's not going away.
Right.
So one question to you is talk a little bit about that again. And I'm not even saying it on behalf of any client. I'm just saying that, to me, the idea of a fight between veterans and social equity advocates is not where we want to waste our strength. We're better off working together. Again, as an immigrant, I always say to myself, freedom is not free. Somebody had to bring me to this country. Somebody had to protect me in this country. Somebody had to protect my right to be different in this country than I was where I came from. Got beat up for being a Jew as a 9-year-old. So to me, it is an absolute unconscionable thing and a loser for everybody if we sort of pit veterans against social equity, because we don't have to do that in order to make everybody happy. Where are you on that? What are you hearing? What's the conversation?
Well, I think what our problem was that the veterans points went in in order to get a perfect score, you had to get veterans points too. And I think what it should be instead, I think if we go and we put a score range in there, that would work and solve the problem of the veterans question. It would be political chaos and suicide for some people to say, don't give veterans any credit. I mean, that just would be a bad optics on it, and we don't want to do it. And I disagree with the feedback that we're getting from some people that veterans points are unconstitutional. We see it happen on a lot of applications, police and fire, which is my world on a lot of stuff. When you apply to a police department or a fire department, you get military points if you served in the military that can move you up in the ranking. And so I think that is something that we have to be aware of. It's used in a lot of things, but I think if we give a score range and treat everybody in that range equally, if those military points put you into that range, that's fine. You can still get into that range without the military points. And I think that's probably what we need to look at. So we have to look at how to recognize veterans and their service, but not have it. If you don't have it, you don't qualify. And that's where I think we can do that very easily at revamping the scoring system.
And maybe potentially another, and this is a sort of again, I'm not advocating on behalf of any client. Frankly, I don't necessarily have clients that are particularly zeroed in on this issue. But to me, it seems like another way of solving the problem is perhaps treating veterans points like labor union peace agreement points. That is, where everybody that involves a veteran in a certain way that you guys define gets those points, but they don't water down necessarily the 51% social equity ownership requirement. So this is to say, you get union points, but the union doesn't need to own 51% of the company. And you could probably do the same for veterans, just as another potential solution.
Yeah, I think that's very plausible.
Have you heard from veterans? Because one of the things that I find interesting is that I've heard from a few veterans that are involved in these deals, particularly among the 21, and I think they should be respected. On the other hand, I have not seen this sort of bubble up as a traditional veterans issue for veterans organizations. Are you aware of any cannabis discussions among veterans organizations?
No, from what I'm hearing, the veterans are actually more concerned on the medical cannabis, the number of people that use it because of medical reasons in the veteran world. So I have not heard personally from any of them on that. I've heard more from people that felt they were slighted because they didn't have veterans as part of their ownership team, more so than veterans that were concerned that we were going to pull it away.
Andrew, so still time for one more question, Andrew or Abraham, or comment?
Yes, there is a good question that, let's see, I just had it, give me 1 second.
While you upload it, you mentioned an interesting point that one of the other key issues with the rec dispensaries is that they're only for rec, and a lot of patients are still limited to the 55 to 60 of the original medical dispensaries that were available, where they can still get the medical prices. And there's been a number of people in our community who have expressed concern that they have a rec dispensary a block away from them, but they have to drive an hour to a medical dispensary in order to be able to get the cost savings, which doesn't end up being that much once they tally the cost of gas and transportation. And so if there's possibility to be able to make the rec licenses, whether it's for grower dispensary, available to medical, I think that keeps the very heart and focus of why cannabis was legalized in Illinois in the first place.
I think that's definitely an oversight, because you guys made all the new licenses adult use only. So if I'm a patient with epilepsy, say, and I have a medical card, I can't go to a rec dispensary and not pay taxes and buy medical. I have to essentially buy my medicine retailed over the counter. I can't treat it as a pharmacy. I can only do that with medical dispensaries. So I think, I think it makes complete sense that for patients in particular, there should be as much access to products at the retail level as possible. And also, right now, new craft licenses won't be able to work on medical strains. So they can't purposefully say, hey, we have, an owner with this illness, and he's found that this kind of formulation really helps him. And so that's what we're going to manufacture for people with that illness. Right now, if you're a craft grower, you can't actually do that. And a adult use dispenser can't actually sell that. So I think that's what Abraham's talking about. And I certainly think it's an issue for a lot of people because, when we limit any of this, when we limit licenses, when we limit who they can sell to, what we're really limiting is access, affordability, and quality. And what we're really increasing is prices and sort of uncertainty and randomness in the market. So I think that's a really good point. And I'll shut up now. Thank you, by the way, Leader, for being so tolerant and actually looking interesting when I go on my little diatribes. I've always been grateful because you actually have this incredible ability not to look away and roll your eyes while I thank you for that. That is, I think, a great comment. Andrew, did we have that one last question?
I'm going to ask, will we be able to view the lottery and everyone who's applied for it within, with detailed breakdown?
What does that mean? Like, are they going to be able to watch the lottery on TV, or are they going to get full results of who got what?
Would they be able to look at who has applied for the lottery, as well as a breakdown of their employees, of race, gender, accountability?
I think there are a lot of ongoing questions, Leader, as you know, about the composition of the 21 companies. It's actually a great thing to wrap up on, because on the one hand, we want all these companies to be up and up. We don't want them to have gotten any kind of unfair advantages, sleight of hand. On the other hand, these are companies that legitimately, according to the state of Illinois, won something. And so to what extent does it become theirs? It's not completely theirs yet, because these licenses, the name of what these licenses are called, the first word in the name is conditional. So I think that sets us up for the rest. But so where's the rub there, particularly among the 21? What do you want to see with that? Are you, do you care that people are saying, well, some of them sort of didn't win completely right? Because to some extent, it could be accurate. To some extent, it could be, sour grapes. And to some extent, do we care about opposition research that comes out after an election has been had, right? So what's your thinking on the existing 21? And we'll wrap it up there, because that's definitely a hard question.
Well, and I think that's something that we have to be very careful about as we go through. There are privacy issues in there on that type of stuff. We don't want to expose somebody's whole sales plan to the whole world, because that's theirs on it. When the licenses were reviewed, the applications were reviewed to go through. They were supposed to be done as a blind applicant, so that you would see the statistics, but not necessarily know the names on stuff, to make it a little bit more fairer. But then we have found out that reality-wise, there were times when you had questions, so you had to know who the names were to be able to follow through and back on it. So it's one of those things that it's a fine line to walk on. Now, as to viewing the actually the lottery live, I don't know how they're going to do it. We've seen where there have been news crews in, as people have had their names pulled on other things, that it could happen. I don't know necessarily. I don't think the state's going to stop that from happening, but the state's not going to run a live stream on it. I don't see that happening either. I'll tell you, the state running live stream, even for we've done that on committee meetings right now, has been a difficult thing to make sure that it works well. And you've seen it ourselves working on these Zooms, making sure that connections continue on and stuff like that. So, that doesn't mean it's not something that we can put in to consider later on as we go forward. There's no legal obligation for the state to do it. Let's put it that way. They may choose to, but there's no legal obligation for them to.
Well, if you all let someone from the medical cannabis community in with a cell phone, it'll be streamlined. But in any case, that's certainly for a different venue to decide than us right now. Leader, you are awesome. I love talking with you.
Thanks.
It always makes me smile. And I love the fact that you do, I get so much cynicism from clients, from everybody else, from cannabis community people. Oh, these are just people who are out for themselves. They must all be gazillionaires. And they don't really want to listen to anyone, and they're just blowing smoke. They don't really care about their constituents whatsoever. It's all about power. Sometimes it's not even clear what the goal of that power is. But again, you deal with this cynicism every day of your existence. Every time you walk out of your house and encounter a constituent at the grocery store, you deal with this kind of cynicism. But I really want to tell you that there is nothing that can substitute for familiarity and getting to know somebody and becoming comfortable with them and understanding that that is in fact civics 101. This is the way you get things done. And so those folks like you who have recognized your role and achieved your role, not just as the leader in Springfield, but our leader in some ways, I just want you to know that is incredibly meaningful to a lot of us, aside from what we have to earn or what power we want or what our ego is. It's just really important because it makes us understand that we matter. And so I just want to, on behalf of all of us, as we wrap up, I want to thank you.
Well, it's been my pleasure to work with you, and I think we have a lot of work to continue to do together, but we'll keep working it that way. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Leader. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
And Abraham, good luck with
Thank you,
everything in
everyone,
Florida.
for coming. Thank you so much. We'll be checking in with updates. Thank you all for attending. We'll see you on our next show.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, everybody. We'll post our question and answers after, if anyone is still interested. Thank you for tuning in.